I'd ask you to please join the commission in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jorgensen. Here. Commissioner Zundell. Here. Commissioner Jardis.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Let the record show all five commissioners are present. Item D is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it's been distributed in front of you.
Well,
Commissioner Jorgensen moves to approve. Is there a second?
second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the order of the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item E is the approval of the minutes of April 21st. Again, they have been distributed and in your packets.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Zundell seconds. Been moved and second to approve the order of the approve the minutes of April 21st. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item F is building permits. Again, the report has been distributed and in your packets.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Anderson moves to approve. Is there a second? Commissioner Jorgensen seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the building permits as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are now on the consent agenda. We have items A through M.
I make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Zundell moves to approve the consent agenda, items A through M as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, items A through M as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. We are now on the regular agenda. Item number 1 is public comment. Madam Secretary, has anybody signed up for public comment? You do not have anyone, all right? Moving on to item number 2, public hearings. We have no public hearings per se this evening. No. Oh, excuse me, public hearing, A24-28, ordinance amendment to Title IV and Title X regarding the establishment of regulations and licensing standards for short-term rental. We call on Mr. Aaron Nelson, Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of West Fargo. I have too many notes on my sheet, so my apologies.
No problem. All right, good afternoon and thank you. So item 2 is a ordinance amendment regarding the regulation and licensing of short-term rentals of residential dwellings. The requested action tonight is to hold a public hearing and to consider first reading of the ordinance. The ordinance was recommended for approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their April 15th meeting. So as for staff's presentation tonight, I'll just start by providing some historical context and outlining some of the discussion at some couple of recent Planning and Zoning Commission meetings before summarizing the proposed ordinance structure. So to maybe just start back at the beginning, back in August of 2024, the City Commission directed staff to explore policy options regarding the topic of short-term rentals. The following month, in September, staff presented the Commission with a technical memo summarizing staff's findings and providing a few policy considerations. A copy of that memo is included in your packet tonight for reference. And at that September meeting, the Commission directed staff to develop a comprehensive short-term rental ordinance with licensing requirement. And so a multi-departmental group of staff members worked to develop and refine a draft ordinance and associated licensing procedure, which is the item here in front of you tonight. A preliminary version of the ordinance was presented to the City Commission for review and feedback back on February 24th of 2025. The ordinance was then presented for public hearing to the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 11th, at which several individuals spoke in opposition to the regulations. The primary concern raised was in relation to the proposed requirement to only allow short-term rentals within an individual's primary residency, or primary residence, excuse me. Ultimately, the Planning and Zoning Commission directed staff to remove the primary residency requirement and to bring back a revised ordinance draft for further consideration. The revised version of the ordinance was then presented for additional public hearing at the April 15th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, at which individuals spoke both in favor of and in opposition to the ordinance. A few speakers appreciated the removal of the primary residency requirement, but also indicated that they would prefer little or no regulation to the current ordinance. One speaker did speak in opposition to the current ordinance and actually in favor of the previous version of the ordinance, which did include the primary residency requirement. The Planning and Zoning Commission ultimately voted 6-1 to recommend approval of the current version of the ordinance, which is included in your packet here tonight, and which a red line version of the ordinance changes are also included in your packet for reference of those changes. So with that context, that brings us to the current version in front of you today. A lot of this information will be the same information that was presented to you back in February 24th. So I'll try and keep things relatively high level and let you all ask questions as you might have them. So in summary, the proposed ordinance would require short-term rentals to be licensed by the city annually in order to operate. They would establish minimum standards for short-term rental operations and provide a mechanism for ensuring collection of sales and lodging tax. The ordinance also includes a slight amendment to Title IV, which is our zoning and subdivision regulations, which would specify that short-term rentals are allowed in any dwelling unit so long as they are properly licensed with the city in accordance with Title X. The licensing application process would include verification of ownership, proof of liability insurance, confirmation of compliance with state and local lodging tax requirements, designation of a local contact person who can respond to any issues within 2 hours, an on-site safety inspection, as well as the notification of neighboring property owners. Standard requirements for short-term rentals included in the ordinance include such things as maximum occupancy, off-street parking requirements, record keeping of guests, restrictions on outdoor signage, and then application of standard city ordinances regarding noise, snow removal, mowing, property maintenance, and other nuisance issues. The ordinance includes provisions for enforcement, with violations treated as infractions that could result in escalating fines on a rolling 12-month basis and/or suspension or revocation of the license. These denials, suspension, or revocation would be appealable to the City Commission. So that's a very high-level summary of the ordinance itself. Again, I'm happy to dive into specifics or details. The thing that I would note here is that there have been probably 3 main changes to the draft since it was last presented to the City Commission on February 24th. The first biggest change is, again, the removal of that primary residency requirement per the direction of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Again, that requirement would have only allowed short-term rentals within dwellings that are occupied for normal residential use more than half of the year. The second change is the addition of a requirement for staff to notify owners of neighboring property when a license is issued. And then third, there has been some changes to the violation section, specifically regarding that rolling 12-month repeat violation window. So the last couple of things that I just want to make sure I note here is that staff recommends that the effective date of the ordinance, if adopted, be set for at least 4 months after the final approval date, as staff would need time to flesh out and stand up the internal licensing application review and approval process internally. We would need some time to work out all the details of how that process would actually work between the multiple departments that would be involved. And then last thing I would note is just that staff is still evaluating the proposed licensing fee structure. The intent would be for staff to bring forward a resolution for the establishment of applicable fees to accompany the second reading of the ordinance if it's approved. So with that, the requested action tonight, again, is to hold that public hearing and then to consider the first reading of the ordinance. So happy to dive into any details or questions as you may have them for staff.
Questions for Mr. Nelson? Commissioner Zundell?
Where did you land on who notifies the neighbors? I was looking at the short-term rental application, and I wasn't sure I saw that. And I don't know that I saw that in the list for the process either.
That would be the responsibility of city staff.
So the city staff, and are they gonna notify them after the license has been issued?
After it's been issued, within a radius of 150 feet from the subject property.
150 feet?
Yep.
So on average, how many houses is that on a city block? Is that like your 2 immediate neighbors?
Yeah, probably 2 to 3 immediate neighbors, roughly.
Within
or
the
take.
neighborhood? And the ones behind you, I suppose? Okay.
Yep.
And then, are you, I noticed on this application as well, it still talks about it being a primary residence. You have to verify that it is your primary residence, but that was removed.
That section was removed.
'Kay.
It would just be verifying that the person applying for the license is the actual owner of the property.
'Kay.
It would not be required to be their primary residence with the current version of the ordinance.
Okay. And when you're notifying the neighbors, what are you essentially notifying them with?
Essentially that a short-term rental license has been issued for such and such a property, and then maybe some general guidelines on, what the parameters are, and then contact information, if they have any concerns, basically.
Okay, thank you.
The notification is by mail?
Sorry, what was that?
By mail?
By mail, correct, yep.
Commissioner Jorgensen, do you have something?
I have 2 items. On page 8 of your packet. The very bottom where it says that no more than 5 people were not related, was there much pushback on that? Do they know a lot, like when I travel,
Mhm.
there's 4 to 6 couples.
Yep.
We wouldn't be allowed to rent unless
Yep. There was, my recollection was there was a couple, maybe 1 or 2 folks that provided testimony as part of the public hearing during the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, did bring that up. The rationale behind the proposal here is that we would be treating short-term rentals the same that we would be treating any residential property. Currently, the zoning ordinance limits occupancy of a dwelling unit to no more than 5 or fewer unrelated persons or a family. So a family could have more than 5 people. But if you're,
a friend of mine's living illegally because he's there with his daughter and his girlfriend is there with their 2 sons.
yeah,
They're not married.
But you'd have a related family. You'd have 2 related families, so the amount of people that are unrelated.
Let's keep the conversation to Mr. Nelson, please.
And then on page 22, the fines. Is there a grace period where they gave their first strike and 6 months does it disappear?
so the fines, let's see. So right now, the way that we've got it kind of penciled in is that we have a list of kind of first offense, second offense, or third offense. As you can see on the screen there, so $250, $500, $1,000 for third offense. I think the intent of adding that rolling 12-month violation window is that that's how we would measure, what constitutes a second violation versus a third violation in a 12-month period. So if somebody has a violation 1 year and then 3 years later they have another violation, we would treat that as a new first violation, for example. Yeah, yep.
Commissioner Olson?
So you're talking about violations of people who actually have a license. What about for the people who don't have a license and are operating a short-term rental?
Yep.
What do we have for that?
So for that situation, we do have I think it's a 30-day grace period where people are notified that you're required to have a license in the city of West Fargo. You have 30 days to come into compliance. If they don't come into compliance by that 30-day window, then I would imagine some of these fines, we'd still be eligible to apply these fines to those individuals, those owners. I'll defer to the city attorney on that, maybe.
Yeah, we'd still consider it a violation of this chapter, so it would be a first offense, second offense, and add up that way.
So how long do they have? They only have 30 days, and then they don't come within violation in 30 days, then they get hit again, violation number 2 right away?
Yeah, so they'd have 30 days to basically apply for the short-term rental license. And then depending upon the nature of the situation, it might be a situation where it's not allowed anyway, and so we would need to, I guess we would need to address them as they come, but
So if, let's say this ordinance is in place, we find out that they're in violation today, come June 4th or whatever, 5th, they don't have their license applied for even, we're gonna hit them with the second one, second violation. Or do they get another 30 days to come into, come into compliance after that? And then how long can they drag this out before they actually get, shut down or whatever we would do to them? Because they're all supposed to be, it'd be the same way if we had a bar operating out there with no license. What do we do with them,
Yep, that's a good question, and maybe I'll start to answer and defer to the city attorney. But the initial, discovery of somebody operating without a license, there would be no violation up front. It would just be, you have 30 days in order to apply for your license. If they did not come into compliance within that 30-day, after being notified, within 30 days, if they're still operating, not in conformance with our ordinance, I would imagine that would be the first violation, and we could pursue, the fines, up including, first, second, and third offense. After that, that's where I would have to defer to the city attorney in terms of what our maybe recourse would be after the fines are.
Yeah, we can certainly build something then where it's 3 or more, right? Hopefully in a year period, they would get something fixed, but we can certainly build it in and say it's 3 or more violations would be that fine.
Okay, thank you.
How many of these properties can you identify in the city of West Fargo?
We don't have a specific number, but there's at least probably a couple of dozen that are active at any given time if you were just to go online and search for a short-term rental on some of the platforms.
So when you say you're gonna give public notice, that's in the newspaper, you're not mailing them directly as the owners, or do we have that identified?
So when somebody applies for a short-term license and they check all the boxes and city staff approves the license and issues the license, that's the point in time where we would send out letters to property owners within 150 feet. We would not include anything in the newspaper or anything like that. It would just be the mailed notification letters to neighbors.
With all due respect, if you can't identify them now, how are you gonna know who to notify?
Well, the notification would take place specifically for people that are coming in and getting licensed. So we would know of them at that time. If there are folks operating that we don't know about, that would require, some type of a complaint or something to come in order for us to investigate and discover some of those that are operating without a license.
Yeah, I think we're talking two different things there.
If you don't know who
My
they
apologies.
are, how do you know you're expecting them to come in and get a license?
Oh, notifying
Yes.
for the adoption of the ordinance.
Yes.
Gotcha, yeah. So I think certainly we would, work with communication staff to, use our media outreach to notify the citizens that if this does get adopted, that it is adopted, as well as the timeline for when it would come
That's
into
what
effect.
I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, my apologies for the confusion there.
All right. Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Nelson? Commissioners? Ms. Schmidt, anything else from legal counsel side of things?
No, nothing, thank
All
you.
right. Anyone? All right, we close the regular meeting, and at this time, we are in public comment, or in a public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of the ordinance proposed? In favor of it? Please step to the microphone and identify yourself, Mr. Erickson.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and members of the West Fargo City Commission. My name is Tyler Erickson, and I'm a resident of West Fargo. Because this is green, it's on, right? You can, okay. I stand today to express my support, as you already know from the comments that I submitted, not of the current proposed version of the STR ordinance, but the March 2025 version of the STR ordinance, which, as you know and are well acquainted with, the idea that March 2025 version includes that primary residence requirement of the owner. And just as I began at the Planning and Zoning Commission level, I also want to begin again with expressing my gratitude to the West Fargo City staff for putting this ordinance together, and to all of you for having the foresight to get ahead of these things. Although we don't have a grasp fully on what is actually happening out in the marketplace. I think it's good to at least have something prepared and out there, so there are some guardrails within which to operate these commercial types of arrangements. I think you've all done a great job so far, as the Planning and Zoning Commission has throughout this process, debating its purpose and its effects, and I appreciate your effort in considering all the parties involved. Just to answer one of the questions that were just recently posed, I believe one of the edits that were, or one of the revisions that were removed from that last, from the March 2025 version was a compliance period. That I don't know exactly what the time frame was concerning that compliance period or that transition period for these already operating short-term rentals out in the marketplace, but at least that there was something that was removed that allowed for a transition period to happen and for these arrangements to come into compliance, as far as I know. Just up front, I know it's our second 80-degree day outside, and I'm not going to talk too long, so I'm just going to try to flow through everything that I've written here. And because it looked like the Planning and Zoning Commission comments that I submitted were not included with your agenda materials today, and you've already had an opportunity to read through my submitted comments, I'm going to blend those two sets of comments together. And I want to begin by saying my cursory understanding of municipal zoning ordinances is that to be valid, they must fulfill three baseline requirements. Number one, they be reasonable and serve a legitimate governmental purpose. Two, they promote orderly development and preserve property values. Three, they must not deprive property owners of all reasonable uses of their land. And there's a case that supports that idea. And not for any other reason, but those concepts are supported legally, those ideas. The proposed March 2025 version of the STR ordinance, from my perspective, more than fulfills all the baseline zoning requirements that I previously mentioned above, and particularly the provision requiring the STR to be limited to a person's primary residence. Notably, requiring an STR to be an accessory or a subordinate use to an owner's primary residence aligns with the primary purpose of residential zoned neighborhoods and also accomplishes other similar goals. And I've got four laid out. I'll just talk about the two that I think are most important. Number one, it prevents incompatible commercial use of a residential property, and it preserves and safeguards the residential longevity characteristics of family-focused neighborhoods throughout the city of West Fargo. Respectfully, the opponents of the primary residence requirement of the STR ordinance cited the burdens that it would place on them as investment property owners and operators, including characterizing the STR ordinance as a total ban on short-term rentals throughout the city of West Fargo. However, in my opinion, I believe they all seem to overlook the potential net cumulative effect of owning residential homes and exclusively operating them as commercial structures without some reasonable confines and regulations from the city of West Fargo. And as you know, near and dear to my heart, the primary residence requirement of the March 2025 version. From now, I'll be going into some of the comments that I submitted to you. Nowhere, please correct me if I'm wrong, but nowhere in West Fargo ordinance is pure commercial use permitted of a residential property, but our Planning and Zoning Commission approved this short-term rental ordinance allowing that use. And when I was in the room, they did not discuss the implications of that decision. And to be clear, I'm not, here saying that the sky is falling, that short-term rentals are everywhere and they're a huge burden. I'm only here to highlight that the approval of the Planning and Zoning Commission's version of this ordinance, I believe, is problematic and is a significant deviation from policy precedent and ordinance that the Commission has. And on that note, I haven't scoured the entire West Fargo city ordinance booklet, but even a cursory review of the ordinance book, particularly Title IV related to planning and zoning, revealed that use of a residentially zoned property primarily for commercial purposes would result in brand-new precedent for the city of West Fargo. For example, on the West Fargo City website, I found that there were recent ordinance changes in April of 2023 that clarified permitted uses of residential zoned areas for commercial purposes. And in those April 2023 amendments, this body, I'm not exactly sure, I wasn't able to follow all of the edits, but they clarified that certain activities, certain commercial activities are permitted in residential areas. And I've laid them out, there's 8 of them. And of that list, all the uses acknowledge and respect the residential nature of those residential districts and include a statement of intent that explicitly state that they apply to residential neighborhoods with low density, nearly exclusive single-family dwellings, and permits other certain activities compatible. I think that's a very important word, compatible with residential development. And although I went through some of the city ordinances, I wasn't able to find whether residential development, that phrase, was defined. But even a quick Google search shows that residential development, that phrase that's used in our ordinance, does not contemplate, inherently does not include or contemplate the use of residential property for short-term purposes, because the idea is that short-term rentals is a purely commercial activity. And with that in mind, the only commercial activity in current ordinance that is somewhat similar to the activities contemplated in this STR ordinance are 7 and 8 in that list above, which include the home occupation and home daycare. And notably, both arrangements are contemplated in ordinance to be accessory, incidental, or subordinate uses to the residential dwellings. In other words, current ordinance conditions operating a home daycare or home business on first using the dwelling as your primary residence. And interestingly, to pass this ordinance as it came to you from the Planning and Zoning Commission arguably makes it more restrictive to operate a home daycare, in the city of West Fargo, solely because the home daycare requires it to be an incidental or accessory use, so that person must live in that home to operate a home daycare. And I use that example to illustrate that, I think the average person would be more receptive to the idea of a home daycare operating next to you as your neighbor, and not living in it as your primary residence. Mostly because in that type of arrangement, you'd have, the same parents, the same children, the same owner of the property coming and going every day. And the nature of that use is still predictable and just noteworthy. It's a noteworthy example to consider this ordinance against. These STR arrangements will no doubt have an effect on existing homeowners who purchased and live in their homes with the intent of being there long-term, who value long-standing relationships with their neighbors, and desire building memories with their community. Another interesting piece of this ordinance that I brought up during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in April is that the ordinance itself directly acknowledges that specifically in the amended version, section 1310-1603, that a license issued by the city may conflict with the property owner's covenants and simultaneously disclaims responsibility for that conflict when issuing a license. In other words, it's an acknowledgement that many property owners' warranty deeds have these restrictive covenants that restrict it in a way that you can only use it as a residential property, not as a commercial business. And I know anecdotally that my warranty deed, my home was built in 2017, we've got restrictive covenants that does restrict our ability to use it for anything other than a residential purpose. Single family is used a lot, residential is used a lot. And this is even more of a reason to regulate these arrangements with a primary residence component included. And you may be wondering, what is my dog in the fight here? I personally don't have any short-term rentals around me that I know of, but I do live in a neighborhood where there are around a dozen single-family homes owned by a for-profit company that effectively uses the homes as a man camp for their seasonal workers. That idea, although it is different than this short-term type of arrangement, it still is a for-profit company owning the homes, and there's not families in the homes. They house their workers. So it's just as clear as day. And the individuals staying in those homes have no long-term connection to the area that I know of, as the homes sit vacant for multiple months out of the year. And during the time when the homes are being lived in, 3/4 ton and 1 ton concrete company pickup trucks are parked up and down all the streets, and the tenants do throw loud parties. And the long-term integration into a community that builds trust and care between neighbors and families does, in my opinion, does not exist in that swath of housing in West Fargo. And this is the reason, this is my dog in the fight, that I personally don't like the commercialization of my neighborhood. And I feel like if we don't include the residential component of the STR ordinance, then it just, it's a blessing of the city that says you can continue to use residential homes for commercial purposes. And that's just one thing I just have to come up and express my opinion about what I see personally. And in short, I do not desire, right, my neighborhood to become any more commercialized than it already is. And as I believe it is reasonable, so right now I do request that the City Commission approve, of course, the March 2025 version of the ordinance that includes the residential, the primary residence component, as I believe it is reasonable for all the parties involved and does not overly restrict the property owner's right to use their property. And the last thing that I just thought I would note is that, you know, if there isn't a strong appetite from the commission or if the challenge is the current arrangements being required to come into compliance with the ordinance is overly burdensome because of the potential fines, or because they've been operating in that way for a long time and it would be burdensome in that way. You know, I mean, at least from my perspective as the lone person in support of the primary residence requirement, I would be open to the compromise of grandfathering the current, you know, parties into this idea that they can operate it as their non-grandfathered, but moving forward, you would have to live in it as your primary residence. And I also acknowledge that that's difficult, given the fact that we don't really have a handle on the market to know how many are out there, how many are operating. So how would you know which ones are grandfathered and not grandfathered? So I'll stop there. Thank you for your time and consideration of my comments. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Commissioner? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Is there anyone that would like to speak against it? Anyone? Please.
I'm shorter. Good evening. Dave Withy, 2421 Cloud Drive East. What he said, as I was reviewing this over the weekend, the one thought that jumped out at me was exactly this concern about turning a residential neighborhood into a commercial neighborhood. And I don't think my wife would be very happy with me if I voted or if I suggested that this be approved as is. I just think that if the city primarily exists for the residents, this is not something that would help residents in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions of Mr. Nelson, commissioners? Commissioner Anderson?
We're still in the public hearing part, right?
We're still in the public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? Hearing none, I close the public hearing. We are back in the regular agenda. Mr. Anderson?
I guess the question I would have is how do we reconcile between the commercial use of this, the intent of a company, person who's not purchasing it for their primary residence or owns it currently not as their primary residence? How do we reconcile that with it being a residentially zoned property?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, please stop me and clarify if I'm not answering your question. But I think that was really the main point of conversation at the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, was this question of, residential versus commercial. And so, right now, the way that the ordinance is written is it's written to allow, somebody could buy a house and use it as a income producing property and, rent it out as a short-term rental year-round. The previous version of the ordinance did include that requirement that, short-term rentals only be operated out of somebody's primary residence. The intention there, or the logic behind that, was, similar to some of the comments you heard just now, is that it preserves the, primarily residential use of a property, in which case somebody is using it as their primary residence more than half the year, and so, less than half the year, up to a maximum of less than half the year, I should say. It would be rented out, more like a hotel, motel kind of, lodging type use. And so that was, one way that we were kind of thinking about that distinction. But certainly every community kind of handles this question a little bit differently, and there is a whole spectrum of the way that cities handle this question. So I don't know if that's helpful to, answer your question there or not. But.
Commissioner Olson?
Just to build on your comment there, Robin, if you look at tonight's building permits, there's a whole bunch of owners listed there that are going to build a residential dwelling. I'm not going to list them all, but there are LLCs and the like. We don't know what's going to happen after that house is built. We never go in there and double check to see if it's been sold to an individual or they just keep it themselves and rent it out. So I don't want to blow holes into that argument, but we don't know. And we're not I don't think we want to get into that point of policing that after we issue a residential building permit, that we follow up to make sure that it is used strictly for a single family home. We don't want to overreach our reach on that. So that's just one thing that I don't think we want to get into. And I understand the comments that were made tonight. That there's people that I know have built a house and they build it just for the primary purpose of their college kids to go to school in, and there's 3-4 people that live in there, and then when they're all done with college, they sell the house. And they have, I mean, that's not a short-term rental, but it's still, it's something that they did for an economic reason, and it's an investment. So I can't fault people for wanting to do this if they have the all within to do it. Do I want it in my neighborhood? I don't really care. I mean, it's their business. I mean, it's their, I don't mean it as commercial, but it's their personal lives that they want to do it.
Commissioner Zundell?
I think many of the comments that you're making do involve long-term rentals, which is not the issue that we're talking about this evening. I think the other thing that we're not talking about here is I have a hard time that we spend a lot of time talking about the housing crisis and how we don't have enough available homes and we need to figure out a way to do that. And I think the reality is when we allow commercial entities to scoop up essentially homes in neighborhoods for profit and for commercial purposes, we are taking away the availability of homes that a first-time home buyer could buy. I think that's an unintended consequence of allowing that. I think we have told many people that have been operating businesses on this list that are probably a whole lot less intrusive than a short-term rental, that they need to go rent a commercial space somewhere else because we hold so dearly the fact that a residential neighborhood is meant to be a residential neighborhood. So I personally prefer the March 25th portion of it. I also can think back, we didn't even want a campground in our ET. This commission body didn't even want a campground, which is the definition of people coming in to short-term stay in an area. And the reality is, people don't want that by their homes. And I do think it's personal. It is your home, it is your neighbors. And the people that I heard from, why I started this all and asked to look into this, are people who live in homes, who live next to short-term rentals, who are not the business owners who contacted us, that said, this is a really big problem and it's interfering with my ability to live nicely in a residential neighborhood. So I prefer the first. I think if we, I've heard the concept of we could be more lax now, and if it's a problem, we can come back and revisit it. I think then we have a slew of people who are going to have more properties, and then the argument is going to be, well, we can't change it now because too many people are invested, and there's already too many properties that are doing this. I think there's a good happy medium in grandfathering in the current existing LLCs and moving forward. I'm also a strong proponent, if we're not going to do that, that we need to add some type of continuous noise monitoring service into a license requirement.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? I too believe that the way that we have delineated, going back to when we changed some of the ordinances on April 2023 and clarified the permitted uses in the neighborhoods of the 8 items that one of the speakers mentioned, I too agree with him completely on that. Short-term rentals is not part of the approved 8, and I realize that we're looking to amend that whole language in there. So, Commissioners, this is an actionable item. With regard to, it's been suggested that you like the one back in March. Due to open meetings, I don't believe we can do that unless you actually go in line item and amend what you want to amend on this one. This either has to be voted up or down. Am I correct?
This is just the first reading.
Okay, just the first reading, all right.
I move we approve first reading of the planning and zoning approved ordinance.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve. Is there a second?
Does this mean we approve it as is, and we're agreeing with what's in the document as it sits?
The first reading.
First reading.
As it's presented to us, yes.
And if we don't agree with it and we prefer the March 2025 reading, then we would.
We'll have to,
So
please,
you
Ms.
can vote against it, right? We'll have to bring it back for a second hearing. Since this is on P and Z, if there are substantive changes between the first and the second, we'll have to have another public hearing before you can do a second hearing, or a second reading of it.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? Motion fails due to a second.
So now do we have to say we want it, now do we need a motion to say, I want to bring back the March 2025 version for a first reading?
Well, you already had your first reading, so you just have to give us direction on what you'd like to do for us to bring back for another first reading.
So then I would propose we bring back for a first hearing the original document as was originally presented. Is that a correct way to do that?
In its entirety?
In it,
With none of the red lines?
in its entirety. But I guess including because did you change the offense level between then and now?
We changed the 12-month rolling.
To include
counts
the 12-month.
of the offenses, yeah, that was.
So to include that, so the original reading plus the 12-month rolling clarification that you added in.
You heard Commissioner Zundel's motion. Is there a second?
Clear as mud, I'm
Is there
sure.
a second?
Maybe just one
Please,
quick comment. I
Mr.
think
Nelson.
thank you. I think the other thing that we added was the requirement that staff notify surrounding property owners, so.
And
if you
that
want-
as well,
If you want that
please.
included too, okay.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. We have a motion and a second to bring back the previous March language in addition to the language and the penalties. Is there any discussion, further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes on a 3-2 vote. Moving on, we are now on item number 3, and this is an abatement hearing for 1280 Goldenwood Drive, a 2024 value. We call on Paul Fracassi, our city assessor. Good evening, Mr. Fracassi, and welcome.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis, members of the West Fargo City Commission. As Commission President Dardis mentioned, this is an abatement hearing for abatement 4593. The applicant for this property did file a 2023 abatement that was heard in December. The intent when she did file that was to file the 2023 and the 2024 at the same time. Unfortunately, the 2024 one got lost in translation at the county, and it surfaced quite a few months down the road and was sent over to us, so that's why we're hearing it today. She wasn't able to attend the meeting that we already had on the 2023 one at the county, so I did reach out to their commission assistant as well as the state's attorney, and we're just gonna rehold that meeting again. Once we get this one finalized and a motion on it, we'll have the 2023 and the 2024 heard together at the county hearing. As of today, though, I have not had a chance to meet the property owner, so usually if they're here for any comments, we'll let them go, and I'll give my kind of closing information on it before I give a recommendation. So
Thank
we'd
you,
open
Mr.
it to them.
Fracassi. To clarify, this is not a public hearing, it's an abatement hearing, so only the residents at 1280 Goldenwood Drive can speak. So is there anyone from 1280 Goldenwood Drive that would like to speak to this issue? All right. Please do your summary, please.
Yeah, seeing none here, as we previously discussed during the last abatement hearing, the information provided by, or in the abatement by the appellant supports our current valuation, along with the sales comparisons that we submitted. So just like we did in December, we're asking for a recommendation to retain that 2024 value.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioners?
I make a motion, we retain the original value as assessed by the city of West Fargo for 2024.
Thank you, Commissioner Zundell. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. We have a motion and a second to uphold the evaluations as presented by Mr. Fracassi. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Item number 4 is A24-13, R&R addition, request for a subdivision approval. Again, we're going to call on Mr. Aaron Nelson, the Director of Planning and Zoning. Welcome back.
Thank you. So item 4, as was mentioned, is a request for subdivision approval. This request comes to you with a recommendation for approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission. The subject property that we're talking about here today is located at 1042 and 1050 7th Avenue Northeast. This is just south of the Hazers Salvage Yard in the northeast quadrant of the town. The applicant is proposing to subdivide this land into 3 lots for future industrial development. Got an image of the plat here on the screen. The subject property is currently within the M Heavy Industrial Zoning District, as well as the CO-R Redevelopment Corridor Overlay District, and no zoning changes are proposed. The plat includes standard right-of-way dedication for 7th Avenue Northeast, as well as 9th Street Northeast. The city is in the process of acquiring additional right-of-way within this subdivision for the 9th Street Northeast reconstruction project. The subdivision ordinance requires a 5% land dedication, which will be provided via fee in lieu of land dedication with this subdivision. A public dedication agreement outlines the terms of this dedication and is included in your meeting packet. The agreement is coordinated with the city's acquisition of right-of-way for the 9th Street reconstruction project. And so that is also referenced within that agreement as well. Staff finds the application to be consistent with city plans and ordinances. And again, at their May 14th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval. And so the requested action tonight is to approve the R&R addition subdivision along with the corresponding subdivision dedication agreement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Questions, commissioners, for Mr. Nelson?
Move we approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve A 24-13. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Commissioner Anderson seconds. Request for the subdivision approval. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5 is to confirm and the Arbor Day proclamation. Arbor Day coming up in West Fargo is going to be May 16th. So here is the mayoral proclamation. Whereas Arbor Day celebrates the role of trees in our lives, and whereas Arbor Day is an annual holiday encouraging people to plant and care for trees, and whereas the city of West Fargo is dedicated to promoting and maintaining a safe and healthy urban forest to enhance the visual appeal and environmentally quality of the city of West Fargo, and whereas the city of West Fargo also provides public education on the benefits of forestry to make citizens aware of the great importance of tree planting and maintenance, and whereas the city of West Fargo has earned the Tree City USA designation every year since 1983, and whereas trees positively affect us, our communities, and our world by improving air quality, providing oxygen, and they benefit wildlife. And whereas by celebrating Arbor Day, we shape our community's social and economic future through the benefits of an urban forest. Therefore, be it resolved, I, Bernie Dardis, Mayor of the city of West Fargo, North Dakota, do hereby proclaim May 16, 2025 as Arbor Day in the city of West Fargo. Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, the West Fargo Public Library Annual Report. We call on Jenna Cayley for that report. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Just got to scroll up and down. Okay. As you are aware, Commissioners, West Fargo's population continues to grow year after year, and the West Fargo Public Library's usage continues to grow beyond the growth of our population. More people are using library services than ever before. We circulated 36,000 more items in 2024 than in 2023. As circulation of both physical and digital items continues to grow, physical items still reign supreme. So you might think that everybody's on their phones, we're using all of our digital devices now, and yet it still is paper books that people are checking out the most from our libraries. I know this is something that is important to you, and it's important to us as well. What is the return on investment for our residents? Library users saved over $3.5 million in 2024 by using the library to check out items instead of purchasing them. That's $87 per West Fargo resident, or $193 per active library card. Our program attendance continues to grow year after year as well. We've seen a 21% increase since the year 2021. Both our adult and youth services teams do hundreds of programs every year, and we continue to see lots of growth and success. If you were to go out on the street and interview West Fargo residents and ask them what kinds of adult programs they would expect to find at the library, they would probably say book clubs. And in fact, that is our most successful adult program. We have a total of 6 very active book clubs each month. In 2024, Adult Services actually added 2 new book clubs. So we had 4, and because they were so popular, we were packing the room. We added 2 new ones. Technology tutoring is also very popular. We live in a very digital world, and it's really important to know how to navigate that. Just this last week, I helped a gentleman in his 70s who had never used a computer before, but needed to come in and apply for a job. We helped him navigate that and got him, got his resume on the computer and got applications into a bunch of different places. Wish him success in that. And those technology tutors provide one-on-one support for folks that come in, no matter if they need help with your phone, maybe it is applying for a job, maybe it is applying for Social Security. We'll help you accomplish whatever that task is that you're looking to do. You may have heard, commissioners, too, that the library had received a very large federal grant for $1.3 million to expand our technology tutoring program, to hire digital navigators. That grant program through the Digital Equity Act has currently been paused by the federal government. We hope that pause is lifted soon, and that we are able to hire those folks, because this is a really needed service in our community. So stay tuned for more news about that. Kudos to the Adult Services team for their hard work in offering just a wide selection of programs that the community enjoys and benefits from. In 2024, we had over 2,400 attendees at in-library adult programs. Again, if you were to go out on the street and ask West Fargo residents, what do you expect to find for children's programs in the library? They're probably going to say story times, and that is our most popular youth program as well. Last year, we added another session for a total of 3 weekly sessions to help with overcrowding in story time. Shout out to our youth services team, especially Sarah, who's in the picture here. She is a storytime superstar. She is a teacher who got, she would say, headhunted to become a librarian. She does a fantastic job doing story times for babies, toddlers, and preschoolers. This summer we'll be adding another toddler story time as well, because we're getting crowds of 65 to 75 people at those toddler story times. And as you can imagine, that is very busy in our space. Youth Services has had close to 9,000 attendees at their programs in 2024. With West Fargo being long and skinny, outreach is really important to our community as well, in particular for our daycares and our senior living facilities. We delivered 2,565 books to senior homes and daycares in 2024. (2024) was also our last summer with the Little Red Reading Bus, as we secured funding with the help of Commission President Dardis and First International Bank to purchase our library on wheels, which you can see in the picture here. This allows us year-round outreach capacity to reach residents. So we are excited to continue that legacy of the bus with this new vehicle. Last year we visited 5 parks each week, and we had 1,605 visitors. Not pictured here, but the Library on Wheels also made stops in the fall and winter of 2024. So we're, again, just really looking at expanding that service. People love our outreach services, but we're also seeing more people visit our actual building than ever before. Almost 250,000 visits to the library since 2020. 60,701, but it's actually more than that because our door counter was broken for several months at the beginning of the year. So our space is limited in our current main library. We've got our new satellite open here in the building that's been running very smoothly. Things are going well. We're doing great with what we've got. Definitely there is room to keep growing and keep expanding if we have more space, but I've got a wonderful team at the library. They're doing incredible work using all of the dollars very carefully to purchase the books that our residents actually really want, and picking programs that people are interested in. You can tell by the numbers, by our circulation numbers and by our program attendance that they're just really doing a great job. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions from Ms. Koenig? Anyone? Well, thank you to your dedicated staff and to yourself with your leadership. The offerings and the content that the library's, giving to the daycares and the seniors in the 4 senior living facilities, that's great work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Item number 7, the Finance Department budget amendment and contract approval for a lease accounting software. We call him Willie Galindo, Director of Finance, and the purpose of this discussion is to amend the 2025 Finance Department budget and authorize the Director of Finance to sign an agreement with Debit Book. Good evening, Mr. Galindo. Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioner President and fellow commissioners. I come before you requesting a budget amendment to the 2025 Finance Department budget, and also to seek approval to authorize me, the Finance Director, to execute the contract with DebtBook as a GASB 87 and GASB 96 lease query and management software. Starting in 2022, a new GASB pronouncement was introduced, known as GASB 87, whereas prior to this, operating leases were not required to be reported on the financial statements. But as GASB 87 was adopted, this became a priority. And with that, we hired a consulting firm, Ida Bailey, to assist with gathering the lease information, tracking it, and inquiring and reviewing whether or not they first met the criteria of a lease, and secondly, if they met the reporting requirements to be constituted as a GASB 87 reporting. In 2023, we continued this with the third-party consultant, and with that, in 2023, a new GASB pronouncement was introduced, GASB 96, for subscription-based information technology arrangements, or SPIDAs for short. Once again, we utilized I. Bailey as a consulting firm to help track, monitor, create the journal entries that were required for the reporting of the financial statements. After reviewing with my team and staff, having already 2 years of knowledge on this new pronouncements, I feel that it is time to bring this process in-house. And along with that comes the utilization of a software to help us track and monitor these arrangements and contracts, as there is no apparent reason for them to rescind these pronouncements. So from 2022, going forward, perpetually, we will have to track and monitor these leases. And I feel that this tracking software can help my department in doing so. I stand before you to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions, Mr. Galindo?
I make a motion that we amend the 2025 Finance Department budget and authorize the Director of Finance to sign the agreement with DebtBook.
Thank you, Commissioner Gondel. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve and amend the 2025 Finance Department budget and authorize the Director of Finance to sign the agreement with that debit book. And just for a net, there's a net gain in dollars to our taxpayers, so this is a positive thing.
Thank
Any
you.
other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 8 is a resolution approving the termination of West Fargo Office Park, Charleswood, Development Tax Increment District of the City of West Fargo. Welcome
Thank you.
back.
Yes, thank you, President Commissioner. So this is a resolution that is requesting the authorization to close out the Charleswood Tax Incentive Financing District. And further review, we've looked at the schedule of all the revenues that we've received since the inception of this district against all the obligations that have been fully met now. We're requesting to go ahead and close out this district on August 1st. And with that, there will be an amount of $2 million. Let's see where it's at. $2,057,069.22 that would now be going forward back to the local entities that reside around the city of West Fargo. That includes the school districts as well as the park districts as well. And I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mr. Glendo?
Move we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson, second. Motion and a second to approve the termination of the West Fargo Office Park, Charleswood Development Tax Increment District. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is the Charleswood TIF District Resolution Summary of Impact. Information item non-actionable. We're going to call on Casey Sanders Berglund, our Director of Economic Development.
Good evening, President, Commissioner, and Commissioners. Tonight, this is a non-actionable item, and just as you just resolved the Charleswood TIF District or the West Fargo Office Park TIF District, we wanted to put together some information so that you had a summary of the impact of that TIF district that was just closed. So if you'll follow along a little bit on the slide deck here. Okay. Just some general information. We're going to be a little bit brief. The intent here is to have this slide deck available on the City of West Fargo's website, so anyone in the public can go back and reference this information. But for tonight's purposes, just want to be a little bit brief on the a TIF overview and jump into this specific TIF was approved in 2008. There were several amendments to this TIF. However, part of this TIF structure was that there was some land acquisition or a land acquisition loan that was built into this TIF. But the main components were around that the developer had to construct an office park as well as a hotel and conference center. Okay, this slide here is pretty straightforward. You'll see in 2008, this is what this area looked like. You can see the outline in green of where the TIF, this outlines where the TIF district was. And so this is just to give you a visual of what the area looked like when the City of West Fargo voted this TIF district in 2008. In 2004, obviously, you can see in the highlighted areas the major changes. In the next handful of slides, Rachel's going to go over some of the other businesses and some of those effects that the city of West Fargo has had. Some of the things I just want to also point out outside of those boundary lines, you can see across veterans, there's another hotel that joined the city during that time, which is the Element Hotel. You can also, one of the more major things is the infrastructure of the interstate that was developed, and we were kind of ahead in developing this area in a commercial area before the infrastructure of that interstate was developed.
Again, to be brief, we won't go through every property here, but this is all included in a report in your packet. But really want to highlight the big win of this TIF, which is the return for the city by adding value to these properties. So, like I said, we won't go through each one, but just a couple things to note. Crossroads Dental here, this is the smallest parcel in the TIF. In 2008, when this project began, the value of this parcel was $6,000. Currently, it's valued at almost $2 million. So there's really been quite immense growth in this area over these 16 to 17 years. One other thing we were able to incorporate here that you'll be able to see online when you look further is some data from Placer AI. That's allowed us to see some of the visitor counts at these properties. So along with looking at the change in value, we were able to use Placer to see the amount of visitors that have been attracted to these areas, which along with the increase in property value, we're also seeing some positive impacts in visitors and visitor spend in this area specifically. So again, there is a summary and it's in the report, but you can really see just the large growth in value in these properties. And then also included here is an estimated amount of property tax. So now that the TIF is closed and that property tax will start flowing into each political subdivision, you can see the impact that that's going to have going forward. Just to end as we go through here with High Point Networks, Casey may be able to touch on this a little more, but just to point to the success, you know, Tom McDougall, who is the founder of High Point Networks, you know, he has really been a champion of this TIF and what it has done for his business. When he started this business, I think he had, you know, less than 10 employees in this location and has now grown to over 65. And he is just really highlighting what a great public-private partnership this TIF has been. And I think we can really see the success here in how this incentive has worked and has paid off now as we're able to close it and see these successful businesses and the potential for future growth. So I'm going to let Casey touch on these remaining parcels here that are undeveloped.
Great. As you can see, there are 5 remaining parcels in this area. So I guess this is a shameless plug for anyone who's interested in joining this great area. But there's these 5 properties left to be developed. And just to kind of look at an overall impact summary, I think the biggest bullet point that I would just want to say verbally and point out to the public is that the initial property value is $273,400, and the current property value is over $53 million. That's a really big change, right? So that increased value is over 195 times of an increase. So in general, you can see that this TIF closeout, there is as Rachel keeps referencing in your packet, there is a separate report that will outline this resolution and allow kind of some more details around all of the property taxes from the $2 million that Willie referenced, where those will go to and what to expect there. But essentially wanting to really point out that the city has recouped all of the investments that they put forward. The TIF allowed this development to happen, and it created over approximately 300 jobs in this area. And then additionally, as you look through those slides in more detail, you'll see that there's the hotel tax as well as all of the sales tax that these areas provided. So when we talk about the initiation of future TIFs or different areas, this is a great example to look at and see the effect along with the multiplier effects that it's had for the city of West Fargo. At this time, Rachel and I will stand for any questions that you may have.
Any questions, commissioners? Thank you both for the presentation. It's nice to see things like this that, you know, a previous commission made a decision back then, and the benefits that the city of West Fargo has gained from it. So very well done on the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on to item number 10, a basement exemption structure design agreement. We're going to call on Mr. Dan Hansen, our city engineer, and this is to approve an agreement with KLJ. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. The City of West Fargo is one of only a few communities that has a FEMA-approved basement exception, which allows us to construct basements with some flood-proofing design. And recently, we received a final determination letter informing communities that a new flood insurance rate map was approved and it'll become effective in September. Basically what that is it's the flood maps that FEMA produces for communities to use and also for insurance companies to use to find out where they want to charge households or businesses or structures with flood insurance. So we would like to keep that basement exemption. A couple different reasons. One is we're used to being able to construct basements. Here, also, we've got tornadoes. It's a safety feature from that perspective as well. So we are working on putting together a packet to submit to FEMA to be able to keep our basement exception. And one of the things, there's multiple different things that they do with this report that KLJ would be doing. One is working with Braun in determining where the subsurface water level will be in flooding through their modeling, and that's based off of historical reports that they had. Luckily, Braun has done a lot of work in our community, so they have a lot of information to draw from that they're not needing to actually go out and physically do seepage testing. They have enough data where they can do that through modeling. So basically what the seepage analysis does is it determines if floodwaters are going to touch any part of the structure, which includes the basements in the subsurface area. So the result of this will be able to tell us, here's how deep you can dig your basements. Without this knowledge, we would have to only have a basement elevation of 5 feet below the base flood elevation, which is doable with like bi-levels and things of that nature. But if we don't get the basement exception, then we would just be basically moving towards a slab-on-grade community for the most part. So one thing, the reason that we are looking to hire KLJ is they actually just completed this analysis for the city of Fargo. Even though the cities are touching our extraterritorial boundaries where this overall design is going to incorporate, they're not specific. You can't just say that the western and the northwestern side of the extraterritorial boundaries of West Fargo match downtown Fargo. You're further away from the rivers and things like that. So it is a specialized study specifically for West Fargo, and whether we're submitting for either of the types of basement exception, this is an analysis that I'm told that we're going to need with our packet. So I think it's critical for us to proceed with this work, and I believe KLJ, having just finished this work for Fargo, is in a good position to be able to expedite the process for us. I would recommend approving the agreement with KLJ in the amount of $55,100 and would stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Hansen? Thank you. Commissioners?
I move that we approve the agreement with KLJ in the amount of $55,100.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the agreement with KLJ for basement exemption structural design. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Item number 11 is create and enact an ordinance in Chapter 2-06. We call on our city attorney, Katie Schmidt, to approve the ordinance 2.06. Schmidt?
Thank you, President Dardis. And Commissioners, this is the first reading of this ordinance tonight. The City Commission previously directed city staff to brainstorm ways to come up, to brainstorm ways to make routine street maintenance more efficient and affordable. What came out of that was establishing a routine street maintenance plan and the city's ability to perform that street maintenance when the City Commission believes it's in the best interest of the city to do so. The draft ordinance that you have in front of you sets forth that the city engineer will put together a plan to complete routine street maintenance, which may include the city performing the work if it chooses to do so. The ordinance is similar to the crack sealing ordinance that the city previously had. I'm available for anybody questions that you guys have.
Questions from Ms. Schmidt? Anyone? Okay.
Move we approve first reading.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the first reading of the ordinance 2.06. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Jorgensen seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance 2-06. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 12 is to review the policy titled Authorization and Delegation of Policy Approval. We're going to call on Mr. Dustin Scott, City Administrator for the City of West Fargo. The purpose of this discussion is to approve the policy to be effective immediately. Mr. Scott, good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. So, yeah, this policy here is really a policy that'll govern all of our policies. It's proposed to establish varying thresholds to the creation and the approval process with all of our policies. So, for example, identifying which policies will be approved at an administration level and which policies then would come forward to City Commission for approval. So, I call it really, it's our policy of policies. In approving this, we will be able to move forward with several administrative policies that we have been drafting. And I will also like to point out that once our policies are finalized and completed, they will be made publicly available. We are going to be as transparent as possible with our policies that we do create. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Scott? Nothing? All right. Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
We'll move to approve.
Commissioner Anderson moves to approve the authorization and delegation of policy approvals. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the authorization and delegation of policy approval as outlined by Mr. Scott. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Moving on, City Administrator's Report. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. I'll be brief. Start with an update on our budget process. We are underway with the Finance and Administration Departments are meeting with department heads and reviewing their budgets. We hope to conclude that effort in the next couple of weeks and start compiling everything into information that we can deliver to the commissioners, start our one-on-one meetings, go through all of those budgets, get your feedback, and then just a reminder that our first public presentation of our draft preliminary budget is scheduled for June 16th during the regular City Commission meeting. So that's an update on our budget. The last update I'll provide is on our utility billing software transition. This week we are in the process of converting that software to Kuzi. So our portal is temporarily down. ACH payments are able to be received, and residents can call in or stop by City Hall to make utility billing payments. We hope to have the transition complete by the end of the week, and when we are done, we will be rolling out an entirely new portal for the public. So, any questions on our utility billing software?
Questions for Mr. Scott? Please continue.
That's really all the updates I have. I'd stand for any questions.
Commissioners, anything else from Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All correspondence had been distributed to your mailboxes. Are there any non-agenda items any of the commissioners would like to bring forward this evening? I want to make one comment about the item with regard to Airbnbs or whatever. I want to thank the staff for the amount of time they put in, not only with the commissioners, but also with the planning and zoning folks. And I'm also speaking to the planning and zoning folks for their dedication and hard work and reviews and things that they do. But there are times when we're going to disagree. And so again, I don't want that to go unnoticed for all the work that all of our staff did and the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission did on this, putting this together, along with, of course, our legal counsel, Ms. Schmidt. So thank you for all of that. But there are going to be times where we disagree on something. So, anything else, commissioners? Mr. Jorgensen, we welcome you back. We'll let you make the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Zundell.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all.